Welcome to episode 84 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. I've got some news to start this week, and I just want to say that I'll be getting to that baseball deep dive I've been promising for a while. I'll be getting that to next week. So, we start with the tire testing on the oval at Indianapolis that took place last week. Now, as racing fans remember, between the end of the 2004 racing season and the 2005 racing season, Indianapolis repaved their track to better help with Midwestern winters. Now, if you've never experienced a Midwestern winter, good for you. Between the snow and the cold, they are just brutal. I've worked outside, so I'm kind of used to it, but I can tell you it is hell on pavement. Well, as you all know, the repave had very serious and unintended consequences for tires, in that the new track would chew them up very quickly. This led to the infamous, U.S. Grand Prix, where 7 teams, BAR Honda, McLaren Mercedes, Red Bull Cosworth, Renault, Sauber Petronas, Toyota, and Williams BMW, which fielded 14 of the 20 drivers in the race, had to quit because they didn't have suitable tires because Michelin wasn't prepared. And as we all know, the remaining 6 teams, Ferrari, Jordan, and Minardi, ran what many consider to be the worst race in F1 history, though I would still argue that the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix is much, much worse. But to each their own. This led to Formula One leaving the U.S. for almost a decade. Now in 2008, NASCAR didn't learn their lesson as the 2008 Brickyard 400 disaster took place for the exact same reason, but I would argue a much worse race. Finally in 2020, NASCAR left the oval for good. Well, last week, NASCAR had some tire tests with Goodyear on the oval at Indianapolis, and while NASCAR, as of the writing and recording of this, hasn't said for sure if they'll be returning to the oval, since 2024 is the 30th anniversary of the first race, the 1994 Brickyard 400, and as we all know, that was won by Jeff Gordon. Now, I get the point of wanting to run the oval for that particular anniversary, but do they really need to? I liked the oval and the Brickyard 400, but in this day and age, it's kind of a relic at this point. We all saw the issues in 2008 and 2005, and even with the fixes, it's still just another oval in an oval-heavy schedule. I like the road course. I think it's a much better move. And I'm not a road course guy per se, but I do like adding more road courses to the schedule as it does freshen up the product quite a bit. And I like the current setup a lot more than I thought I would, but this is a bigger issue with NASCAR. A lot of people live in the past. Unfortunately, this isn't 1993, it's 2023. The bigger issue here is that NASCAR needs to stop focusing on what they once were and focus on what they currently are. The 1990s have been over for 24 years and they're not coming back, neither are the fans or the TV audiences. Focus on what you have, not what you want. And believe me, this will work because if you listen to your current fans, you don't want to listen to those who left. Because listening and making changes could bring them back. Now, NASCAR does have some mindsets that are kind of stupid, and I'll talk later about that in the final segment, but you got to focus on what you have now, not what you used to have, and not what you want to have, but what you currently have. Okay. So, I do have another NASCAR story, and I rarely bring up specific sponsorships. But this one, I honest to God thought it was a joke when I first heard it. But as it turns out, this is real. So some time ago, I discussed the Sugar Lens Distilling Company, which has a number of NASCAR-themed moonshines out. And I really don't drink hard liquor anymore. I never got around to trying their products. I'm too old to be dealing with hard liquor hangovers at this point in my life. But I say this because Ricky Stenhouse Jr. debuted a new Sugarland product called Eggo Brunch in a Jar Sippin' Cream. Yes, you heard me correctly. It's called Eggo Brunch in a Jar Sippin' Cream. I'm going to read the description on the Sugarland's website, link in the description. We are raising the bar for brunch with this creamy partnership between Eggo and Appalachian Sippin' Cream, With the delicious flavor of toasty Eggo waffles drizzled in syrup, brunch in a jar is the perfect addition to any brunch sips up. Now, if you're like me and you were wondering, what in the world is Appalachian Sippin' Cream? It's another product from Sugarland which they describe as follows. Quote, our Appalachian Sippin' Creams are award-winning rum-based cream liqueurs featuring a decadent array of 40-proof flavors perfect for desserts, cocktails, or anytime treat. Our creams include fine flavors like banana pudding, butter pecan, dark chocolate, coffee, and more. Treat yourself to the sweeter side of the mountains, end quote. That was a mouthful. But the article that I read on JC quoted something called 605 Media Lab in their announcement of the Stenhouse sponsorship, and their write-up is too good not to read. And by the way, I actually want to give 605 Media Lab credit, but I couldn't find a specific link. So this is from the JSki page. From dining al fresco on patios and roof decks to hosting at home with friends, brunch season is in full swing, and so too are its signature specials. Decadent food paired with creative cocktails. That's why, just in time for National Waffle Day, the waffle experts at Eggo and spirit specialists from Sugarland's Distilling Company are pairing up again to bring brunching up a notch with their latest boozy innovation. Eggo Brunch in a Jar Sippin' Cream. Inspired by classic brunch flavors, this rich and delicious creamy liquor seamlessly blends the flavors of toasted Eggo waffles, sweet maple syrup, and rich butter with a hint of smoky bacon thanks to the artistry of the experts at Sugarlands. Plus, this brunch-inspired alcoholic liqueur pairs perfectly with Eggo waffles to elevate any brunch occasion. I think that might be the first time in history the phrase pairs perfectly with Eggo waffles was ever uttered by a human. Continuing, Mom and Dad, this one is made specially for you. Brunch is more than a trending meal. It's a moment to kick back and relax. In fact, 47% of adults say it feels like a treat to go out for brunch. So Eggo, a longtime breakfast favorite brand dedicated to helping parents embrace small wins, enlisted the help of Sugarlands so parents can let go and enjoy that, quote, treat yourself, end quote, feeling brunch evokes all year long. I will give whatever 605 Media Lab is, I will give them credit where credit's due. They write a hell of a good press release. Now on to the product itself. I'm going to say that I like brunch, I like booze, and I like waffles. I don't see these three working together in one bottle, and I may try this just out of a morbid curiosity, but to me it doesn't sound that good. But I have a major concern here. Eggo waffles. Seriously? The most bland and generic frozen waffles you can buy, where no matter which kind you buy or what flavor you get, they all taste the same? The kind of frozen waffles you eat when there is literally nothing better available? How bad are Eggo sales, or how bad do they need promotion that they would agree to this deal? But its major problem is this. Explain to me the logic of a brand that is almost exclusively marketed towards kids making an alcoholic drink. Kids are going to want to try it. That's just the way it goes. Especially if it's a kid-friendly brand like Eggo. I mean, even Disney figured this out when they had an idea for a Ratatouille-themed wine. This wound up getting shot down because they were worried that kids would want to drink it. Yet Eggo, which is almost exclusively geared towards kids, is producing an alcoholic beverage. Just take a second and think about that for a second. Okay, still with me on this? Good. On their website, Sugarlands has a number of recipes that can be made with brunch in a jar, and in almost all of them, they say to garnish them with Eggo minis. Eggo minis, and yet you don't want kids to drink it? And by the way, kids are smarter than you think they are, and they can figure out ways to get into things they're not supposed to, and I can attest to that, because I did a lot of that growing up. I have a feeling that there's going to be issues, and I hope that the legal team at Sugarlands have some plans in place. And obviously this is going to be a little a limited run, but it's just a bad idea from a brand that is geared towards kids. That's all I'm going to say. And with that, segment 1 comes to an end, and up next, some more AEW talk. Welcome back. I discussed AEW and the total shit show they've become last week. Well, this week I'm going to continue, since AEW seems to love giving their critics rope to hang them with, which is what happened last week. Now, there's several different stories that are going on, so I'm going to go in chronological order because, well, you'll see. So on August 14th, details came out between issues with CM Punk and Ryan Nemeth. And for those of you who don't know, Ryan Nemeth is the younger brother of current WWE star Dolph Ziggler. According to House of Wrestling, all of these are from House of Wrestling, by the way, links are in the description. According to the August 14th article, Punk angrily and aggressively confronted Nemeth backstage, getting within inches of his face and asking if they needed to step outside. Punk was upset about the tweet inflaming existing tensions between roster members and felt the social post served as bad optics for the company. The exchange in question was described as, quote, awkward and weird, end quote, and then moved out to the hallway where Punk continued berating Nemeth. Now, Nemeth's issues with Punk stem from a tweet earlier this year where the brother of Dolph Ziggler alluded to the quote-unquote real AEW World Champion being the softest man alive. Punk is said to be looking to keep drama out of the Collision locker room, and for that reason asked that Nemeth not be allowed backstage at Collision. So Nemeth, in his infinite wisdom, tried to defend his quote, soft comment by noting that Punk took the first shot at the Young Bucks, but was met by Punk reiterating much of what he said earlier about existing tensions and optics. Nemeth eventually asked if he should not comment on things Punk says on AEW TV and was told by Punk that it would be a good idea. The two men then shook hands, but tensions have remained, and Nemeth has since deactivated his X/Twitter, or whatever it's calling itself this week, account. So Punk asked Nemeth to call him soft to his face, which Nemeth declined, and Punk then acknowledged that he knew about Nemeth's lack of TV time, and he thought the young star was trying to win points with the EVPs. When it was agreed that no violence would be necessary, Punk asked Nemeth to stop tweeting negative things so everyone can start moving on from the negativity. So later that day, a second article on the altercation was released. Now this one was in response to AEW owner Tony Khan ducking a question while on the Battleground podcast to promote AEW's Fight for the Fallen charity events. In Khan's own words, "I thought it was a great show Saturday night and I don't have any further comment on that. But I am glad people are still very interested in our wrestlers and what's happening after the wrestling shows. I think we'll try to have a couple of great shows this week, but certainly there's been a lot of interest in what's happening in AEW, in and out of the ring." This article also mentions that Hangman Adam Page was scheduled to cut a promo on an episode of AEW of Collision, but it was moved from the Coliseum to somewhere away from the venue. In addition to Nemeth, Matt Hardy, Isaiah Cassidy, and Christopher Daniels were also removed from Collision. Now, Christopher Daniels can be chalked up to his involvement in the post-AEW all-out altercation, try saying that 3 times fast, and was specifically portrayed as to the reason the Fallen Angel is not at Collision. Since Ace Steel, Punk's good friend, was also involved in the altercation but not allowed to return backstage for Collision, Punk is said to feel the same about Daniels and does not want him backstage either. As for Nemeth, we have confirmed his comments on Twitter, where he did call Punk the softest man alive from his now deactivated account, which really didn't do him any favors and is the reason he was asked to leave Collision. Punk really doesn't want there to be drama backstage at Collision and felt that Nemeth's previous comments showed his unwillingness to unnecessarily stir the pot in the locker room. End quote. Now, while Nemeth and Daniels were removed at the request of Punk, it's unclear about Matt Hardy and Isaiah Cassidy's removals. Now, if these reports are true, in this situation, it's really hard to side against Punk here. Hangman Adam Page threw Punk under the bus with a lie. Hangman Page threw Punk under the bus with a lie, and Nemeth was siding with the Elite, and Page tried to get some brownie points from the Elite. Punk really seems to be focused on making his time in AEW work, but with these kinds of issues, it's clear this is going to be difficult. Now, the next day, another CM Punk confrontation took place, this time with Jack Perry. For those of you who don't know, Jack Perry, formerly known as Jungle Boys, is a wrestler in AEW who is the son of the late Luke Perry. Another House of Wrestling story, link in the description. Quote, AEW's backstage AEW backstage information on an AEW backstage confrontation between CM Punk and other talent has emerged, this time with FTW champion, I don't even want to get into what that is, Jack Perry. Fightful reports that during the early episodes of AEW Collision that were being filmed in Canada, Perry was brought in for a segment involving glass. Punk and Perry were said to have words, once Perry insisted on smashing real glass as opposed to prop sugar glass, in the segment which Punk is vehemently against. Apparently, Punk felt that the former Jungle Boy was only making the request so he wouldn't have to come to work next week, something that Punk sees as a problem within the promotion. The article goes on to state that Perry's desire to use real glass went against the wishes of Tony Schiavone, the AEW production team, and the doctors. Toward the end of the confrontation, Punk told Perry that they did not do these sorts of things on Saturday nights at Collision, and that he should stick to Wednesday nights on Dynamite. Shortly after the incident took place, a list of quote-unquote banned moves and safety issues was issued to the AEW roster, requiring them to get clearance from the production team and doctors for certain high-risk spots. I discussed that last week. The article was on, internally this incident is being viewed as an argument between roster members, with Punk himself feeling like Perry came off like he was throwing a temper tantrum, and several backstage people seem to be siding with Punk in this situation. Now let me ask this question, end quote. Since when does Jack Perry, a guy who AEW had to switch heel because he is so unlikable in person, have the pull to decide that he wants to break real glass? Moreover, why would he want to break real glass? Explain to me the upside here. Now, and Jack Perry is not somebody who will listen to advice from wrestling veterans. He's even said, from his own two lips, that he chooses to people who, quote, have the same style that he does, unquote, and those are his words, not mine. This is a company, by the way, that is known for regular injuries, botches, accidental screw-ups. So why would Jack Perry want to do something that almost virtually guarantees an injury? Does he want to cut his career short? Smashing real glass isn't good for wrestlers, and it's been tried in the past. Both Goldberg and Shane McMahon will attest to it's why a bad idea. That's why prop glass is used. Now, with all of that said, CM Punk clearly wants to make his time AEW worked, but it's also transparently clear that nothing backstage is changing. Tony Khan really does let the wrestlers run the company. I guarantee you, if Jack Perry had brought this up in a real wrestling company like WWE, the NWA, or Impact, he'd have been shot down with no chance of appeal. In AEW, this idea almost happened. Go figure. And while I get that Punk wants to have one last run in wrestling, AEW clearly isn't the place to do it. Punk's comment about working with fucking children was spot on, because in both of the examples, they were acting like children. I'm watching how AEW and this whole story is going to play out, and I'm watching it with morbid curiosity because I know this is not going to end well. With that out of my system, I'm taking my last break, and then I'll discuss NASCAR and integrity next. Welcome back. So I have to go on this rant. I've been saving this for a while, but I gotta talk about this now because, well, you'll understand why. Because I talked about NASCAR and integrity in the first segment, but this is a story that deserves a bit more attention because in late 2021, NASCAR fined Mark Harmon and his team for bringing his car to a charity event at Rockingham Speedway. Now, this fell under Section 5.1.A.C.D, vehicle testing of the NASCAR rulebook, as Rockingham is not a sanctioned speedway at the time of recording. Well, a NASCAR sanctioned speedway at the time of this recording. While the fine and points were substantial, these were appealed, and Harmon's team won out in the end. Now, this quote is sort of why I'm going on this rant. This is from Mark Harmon's team. Today, we were notified by NASCAR that they handed out sections against Mike Harmon Racing crew chief Ryan Bell and the use at the number 74 car at an exhibition charity event at Rockingham. Here's the critical line here. This is not an intentional attempt to circumvent the rules NASCAR has in place to ensure the integrity of the sport. In over 4 decades of being in motorsports, I'm shocked at the penalties that were imposed on our team. We will be appealing NASCAR's ruling as we are dedicated to the Xfinity Series, our great fans and partners, and our supporters. The integrity of the sport. I would like someone, and I don't give a rat's ass who, to explain to me how what he did, quote, violates the integrity of the sport. How does a team bringing a show car to a local charity event violate the integrity of the sport? How? Because he was trying to raise money for charity? Because it wasn't pre-approved? Because it's somehow considered testing? How did what he do hurt the sport in any way? He didn't do anything intentionally to hurt the sport. This is the same sport that, by the way, he and his team require to feed their families as well as pay their bills. He wasn't racing to get a leg up on the competition. He was raising money for charity and, above and beyond that, promoting the sport. I would genuinely love to know why NASCAR is limiting what teams and sponsors can do to promote the sport. Why you would do that is a mystery, especially in this day and age. Why would you limit promotion? Their TV numbers are in the toilet, their attendance ranges from mediocre to low at many of the tracks, and most people simply aren't interested anymore. Why not take the leashes off and let teams, drivers, and car sponsors, even the official sponsors, do anything and everything they can to promote the sport? What am I missing here? Who do these restrictions really benefit? And even if you make the argument that quote-unquote official sponsors could benefit, I think the lack of TV numbers and attendance numbers, those speak for themselves. If every team and driver and sponsor is allowed to promote the sport, that would bring in a lot of people. And if more people are watching, more people will see your ads. I know that's kind of a weird concept, but I've seen it work. It worked well in the 1990s. But sadly, this isn't the 1990s anymore. But this also reflects badly in NASCAR in another way. When it comes to the idea of quote-unquote protecting the integrity of the sport, NASCAR is in no position to complain about teams, drivers, and protecting the integrity of the sport. Remember, from 2003 to 2018, Brian France, a Nepo baby who had no idea what the fans wanted, and for most of his run was on a major painkiller addiction, ran the sport almost unchecked, and made so many unpopular decisions he ran off many of the fans. It took over 50... No, it didn't even take over. It took just under 50 years for NASCAR to become the biggest racing series in North America. And Brian France only needed 15 years to run off many of the fans he got during that time. Yet, this man was allowed to run the sport unchecked. Do me a huge favor, NASCAR. Sit down and shut up about the integrity of the sport. Take the leash off. Let the teams, drivers, and sponsors do anything and everything they can to promote the sport. Let them have signings and show cars around every venue you race at. Let your sponsors use their drivers in commercials, and it will attract the attention of non-fans. I know this might sound crazy, but believe it or not, the teams, drivers, and sponsors, they want the sport to succeed. Why wouldn't they? Their livelihoods depend on it. And it's amazing how everyone else outside of the sport, from media members to YouTubers to fans, can see all of the problems that are going on within NASCAR. But the people at the top who have the most to lose just don't see it. NASCAR would benefit greatly by taking the leash off and letting the teams, drivers, and sponsors promote the sport to no end. But NASCAR is going to keep the leash on and not bring new people in. And believe me, the TV and attendance numbers back this up. I really, 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 really want NASCAR to succeed long term. But it isn't looking good, and I hope they get their shit together, but they probably won't. Okay, so episode 84 is coming to an end. But I've got a few things going on next week, so I'm not going to do a traditional news-based podcast next week. I'm going to be doing that baseball deep dive, and I got something else planned too. Until then, I'm Dave Farson. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next week.